Morning drawing, give me morning drawing. I'm drawing to my baby.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, may I please ask you to take your seats in order for us to begin with the opening ceremony of the high-level segment. Distinguished delegates, may I ask you please to take your seats in order for us to begin with the opening ceremony of the high-level segment. Thank you.
Non, c'est bien, on est pas mal. Maintenant, le plus dur, vous savez, ça va être de gérer ces photographes pendant 5 minutes et après, c'est tranquille. Oui, non, mais moi, je vais y être. Alors. Gerhard va amener une partie de la presse, 15. Après, ils s'en vont, 15. Et après, ils sortent. Non, non, je vais me mettre là. Moi, je vais me mettre là parce qu'il y a un chef d'État là-haut. On commence à arriver. Président.
Okay. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats in order for us to begin the opening of the high-level segment. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the opening ceremony of the high-level segment on the occasion of the 17th session of the Conference of Parties and the 7th session of the Conference of Parties, serving as the meeting of parties to the Kyoto Protocol. This afternoon, we are honored to have with us His Excellency Mr. Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma, the President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Mr. Meles Zenawi, Honorable Prime Minister of Ethiopia, His Excellency Mr. Ali Bongo Ondimba, President of Gabon, His Excellency Mr. Sprint Dabido, President of Nauru, His Royal Highness Prince Albert II, Sovereign Prince of Monaco and Head of State, His Excellency Suleiman Ndene Ndiaye, Prime Minister of Senegal, His Excellency Mr. Faustin Touadera, Prime Minister of Central African Republic, His Excellency Mr. Toilepa Sailele Maile Leguai, Prime Minister of Samoa, and Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my pleasure to invite the Executive Secretary of Climate Change Secretariat, Madam Christiana Figueres, to address the plenary. Madam Executive Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. His Excellency Mr. Jacob Zuma, President of the Republic of South Africa. His Excellency Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations. Most honorable heads of state and government. Her Excellency Ms. Nkwana Mashabane, President of COP17 and CMP7. Honorable ministers, excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the opening of the high-level segment of COP17 CMP7. At the outset, allow me to once again express my sincere thanks and appreciation to the city of Durban and the government and people of South Africa for having welcomed us with open arms and hearts, and for having given us excellent conference facilities. Honorable ministers, during the course of the past 8 days, your delegates have achieved good progress on a number of issues, in particular on support to developing countries, including national adaptation plans, the Nairobi Work Program for promoting adaptation actions, and a work program on loss and damage from climate change impacts, the Green Climate Fund, the conditions for safely supporting the reductions of emissions from deforestation, the governing arrangements for the technology mechanism, further progress on monitoring, reporting, and verification, and increasing clarity on how to take forward the review. While not yet complete, with this progress, I am confident that the Durban Conference can fully operationalize the Cancun agreements. At the same time, there are a number of issues which have made some progress, but that still require some guidance from ministers. You will be briefed on these issues by the COP President and by the chairs this evening. Concurrently, there are issues that require not only your guidance, but in fact, your very active engagement. Excellencies, the time has come to address the thorny political issues before us. These issues are not new. They concern reliable long-term funding, the second commitment period under the Kyoto Protocol, and the future of the mitigation framework under the Convention. One of the great figures of South Africa's history, Walter Sisulu, once said, "It is a law of life that problems arise when conditions are there for their solution." Delegates have steadily advanced in creating those conditions during the past week. But it is now for you, ministers, to craft the solutions. Those solutions will be the outcome from this conference, and they need to ensure that there is clarity on the contours of a second commitment period under the Kyoto Protocol, and that an implementation gap is ruled out. That there is clarity on how to achieve strong, rules-based rigor and structure in the global effort to tackle climate change going forward. That there is clarity on how to avoid an ambition gap, and that there is clarity on how funds will be scaled up from now until 2020. Your Excellency President Zuma, during your opening address last week, you observed that delegates carried solutions on their faces, and you were right. Some operational solutions have already been tabled. With the arrival of heads of state and government and ministers, I am confident that you and the Secretary General will also see solutions on those new faces here today. Because, Excellencies, the vulnerable need urgent solutions from you, and future generations need a visionary legacy from you. Thank you.
I would like to thank Madam Christiana Figueres for her statement. Your Excellency, President of the Republic of South Africa, Excellency Mr. Jacob Zuma, Your Excellency, Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Your Excellencies, Heads of States and Government, Your Excellency, the Chair of the African Union Commission, Dr. Jinping, Honorable Ministers in the Cabinet of South Africa, and Honorable Ministers who are heading delegations to this important conference. Members of the United Nations Framework for Climate Change Secretariat, led by Madam Figueres, distinguished delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome you and your excellencies, heads of state and government, as well as our ministers and other members of delegations to the official opening of the high-level segment of COP17, COP17 conference in Durban. I'm honored to preside over COP17, COP17 on behalf of my country, South Africa, and her people. I must also recognize the President of South Africa and thank him for honoring us with his presence. To the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, we have been working together for the past months and since the beginning of the conference last week. Thank you for putting your team at my disposal to support us in discharging our role and responsibility as the COP presidency. We've already had 2 bureau meetings as well as other regular meetings with the chairs of the working groups and subsidiary bodies of the convention and its protocol. The constructive working relationship that has been established bodes well for the process ahead of us as we now enter the high-level segment of COP17, COP17. For the past week, the negotiators have been hard at work to prepare for the high-level segment to ensure that the ministers would not be overloaded with the magnitude of outstanding issues. The ministers will have to take leadership so that pressing issues that need to be resolved receive their guidance and leadership. Since the conference started last week, I've been encouraging the negotiators to be flexible and to give the assurances required amongst them to work in a transparent and inclusive way with a view of ensuring that all the positions are heard and accommodated. I wish to make the same appeal to you, honorable ministers, to show leadership in action by showing willingness to reach beyond national interest in finding a global solution for the common good of all. To enhance this process, we have embarked on informal Indaba consultations during the week on the various outstanding issues. Excellencies, Indaba is a South African word of Zulu origin, meaning a gathering where people are free to air their views towards a common goal. We have chosen this word for these informal consultations, not only because we are in the province of the Zulu-speaking people, but also because we hope parties will use the Indaba talk to talk to each other, not past each other. I am pleased that indeed informal Indaba meetings have given parties the opportunity to work within the transparent and inclusive process required. And thanks to them, we have been able to advance the process substantially. Therefore, I will continue with this Indaba process during this high-level segment. Excellencies, colleagues, 3 days ago, the UNFCCC Executive Secretary and I were standing in an open van under the blessings of the rain to receive a memorandum from concerned citizens of the world who had marched through the streets of the city of Durban. This memorandum was not the first to be presented to us. We had received similar petitions from various constituencies, ranging from the youth movements, rural women to religious organizations. These constituencies, who constitute an important segment of the world citizenry, are expecting leadership from us to find solutions that will give them hope and secure their future. We have a responsibility not to disappoint them. I believe that as a collective, we can rise to the challenge that comes with the slogan that we have chosen for this COP, working together, saving tomorrow, today. We are in Durban with one purpose only, and that is to find common solutions for climate change challenges that affect us all. In my role as your facilitator to help reach a balanced, fair and credible outcome, I've been following the UNFCCC party-driven process, which is transparent and inclusive. This approach is informed by the UNFCCC principles such as multilateralism, environmental integrity, fairness. By that we mean common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, equity and the honoring of all international commitments and undertakings made in the climate change process. Throughout my role as the incoming and now the president of the COP, I have been making an appeal that Durban is a decisive moment for the future of the multilateral rule-based climate change system. As we are all aware, the first commitment of the Kyoto Protocol will come to end in 2012. We have no option but to deal with the outstanding political issues remaining from the Bali roadmap. This means finding the resolution to the issue of the second commitment period under the Kyoto Protocol and agreeing on the legal nature of the future climate change system. In addition, it is important that we also operationalize the Cancun agreements, including the establishment of the key mechanisms and institutional arrangements agreed to in Cancun, such as the Green Climate Fund. When we focus on the Cancun outcomes and agreements, adaptation has to be an essential element for any outcome that is, as it is a key priority for many countries who demand that adaptation receive the same attention as mitigation. The bottom line, therefore, Excellencies, is that we need to create an environment from where we will be able to work together. In this regard, I am hopeful that in the final week, we will consider what we need to do now or immediately and what we need to do in the future. I believe this approach will guide us on the way forward. To our distinguished Excellencies and Ministers who have graced this occasion, we are looking forward to your guidance, your wisdom and support for the movement on difficult political issues. Let Durban be the place that will be remembered as the place where parties were able to work together, giving each other the necessary reassurances to secure a platform of trust. Let the high-level segment of COP17, COP17, leave a legacy in the climate change negotiations in our endeavor to work together to save tomorrow today. I thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like now to invite His Excellency Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations, to address our meeting. It is a pleasure for me to give the floor to you, sir.
Your Excellency, President Zuma of South Africa, Your Excellency, Foreign Minister Maite Nkoana Mashabane, President of COP17, distinguished heads of state and government, Your Highness, Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure and privilege for me to be with you today. President Zuma, we thank you and the citizens of South Africa, in particular citizens of Durban, for your gracious and stirring welcome. The negotiations of the coming days will be challenging. This we know. Let us therefore determine that in spirit we'll be as warm and generous with one another as the hospitality we have been shown. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me speak plainly. We must be realistic about expectations for a breakthrough in Durban. We know the reasons: grave economic troubles in many countries, abiding political differences, conflicting priorities and strategies for responding to climate change. And it may be true, as many say, the ultimate goal of comprehensive and binding climate change agreement may be beyond our reach for now. Yet, let me emphasize, none of these uncertainties should prevent us from taking real progress here in Durban. Indeed, we can and we must move forward on key issues. I'm pleased that many parties have proposed creative ways forward. Throughout human history, in many great endeavors requiring the common effort of many nations and men and women everywhere, we have learned it is only through seriousness of purpose and persistence that we ultimately carry the day. We might liken it to riding a bicycle. You stay upright and move forward as long as you keep momentum. Ladies and gentlemen, we must keep up the momentum. That is the challenge before us today. That is the imperative. It would be difficult to overstate the gravity of this moment. Without exaggeration, we can say the future of our planet is at stake. People's lives, the health of global economy, the very survival of some nations. The science is clear. The World Meteorological Organization has reported that carbon emissions are at their highest in history and rising. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, tells us unequivocally that greenhouse gas emissions must be reduced by half by 2050 if we are to keep the rise in global temperature to 2 degrees since pre-industrial times. According to the International Energy Agency, we are nearing the point of no return, and we must pull back from abyss. You are the people who can bring us from the edge. The world is looking to you for your leadership. As a Secretary General, I travel widely around the world, and everywhere people ask me for help. They ask for our help as the United Nations, as nations united. This year, one of the Pacific islands of Kiribati, a young boy told me that I'm afraid to sleep at my home at night because this land, this island, Kiribati, is sleeping beneath the waves. There are many such small islands in Pacific and elsewhere. He was afraid that he may be swept away by the tide while sleeping. In the Andes and Alps, I have seen melting glaciers. At both of the Earth poles, I have seen open sea, where ice once dominated the horizon. I have seen arid lands where in the sun once shone on mighty rivers and great lakes. In the Amazon, flying over Lake Chad in the African Sahel, flying over Aral Sea on the vast steppe of Central Asia. I have met personally with thousands of people who have lost all to catastrophic floods and spreading deserts. And just last month, I flew over mile and mile of devastated virgin forest and peatland in central Kalimantan, Indonesia. Is this the future we want? A world of out-of-control climate change and the devastating scarcity of vital resources? A world divided bitterly between rich and poor, and the vulnerable and the privileged? Or do we want a sustainable future that fulfills the promise of the United Nations Charter? The answer is clear if the exact path is not. Even if the exact path is not. Yes, we all recognize the realities of our time, the economic crisis, the dictates of fiscal austerity, often difficult domestic politics. Yet the world and its people cannot accept no for an answer in Durban. To the contrary, I say to you that now is the moment to be ambitious. This is not the first time that we have confronted the skeptics, the naysayers, and proved them wrong. In 2007, you showed leadership and came away with the Bali roadmap. In 2009, people said Copenhagen was a failure, yet it was not. There were significant commitments on financing for mitigation, adaptation, and technology transfer. Last year in Cancun, you firmed up and built on those foundations. We saw international commitment to deep cuts in global greenhouse gas emissions that will hold the increase in global average temperature below 2 degrees from industrial times. You have shown that multilateralism can deliver. Here in Durban, we must keep up the momentum. Let us not falter. Let us not allow our valuable work to go to waste. I expect the 4 things you at this conference, 4 incremental advances that will carry us toward the future we want. First, we must implement what was agreed in Cancun. This means ensuring that adaptation framework and its committee and the technology mechanism and its climate technology center and network are ready to start working as soon as possible. Assessing the most vulnerable is both an obligation and smart investment in a sustainable future. Second, we need tangible progress on short-term and long-term financing. On short-term, fast-track financing, $30 billion has been pledged, and almost of it has been identified in national budgets. However, recipient countries want to see greater transparency in how the funds are allocated and dispersed. The UNFCCC Secretariat has created a tool to do this. We also need prompt delivery of these funds to where they are most needed. On longer-term financing, we need to mobilize $100 billion per annum by 2020 from governmental, private sector, and innovative new sources. My high-level advisory group on climate change financing, led by Prime Minister Meles and Prime Minister Stoltenberg, has shown that this is feasible. And it is essential that we stick to our commitment. In Cancun, you created the Green Climate Fund. Let us launch it here in Durban. And I appeal to all industrialized nations to inject sufficient initial capital to allow the fund to begin its work immediately. This will inspire confidence and generate further momentum for action. Third, the future of the Kyoto Protocol. In the absence of global binding climate agreement, the Kyoto Protocol is the closest we have. While Kyoto alone will not solve today's climate problem, it is a foundation to build on with important institutions. It provides a framework that markets sorely need. Carbon pricing, carbon trading depend on a rules-based system. It is important that we do not create a vacuum. Therefore, I urge you to carefully consider a second commitment period under the Kyoto Protocol here in Durban. Fourth and finally, we must not forsake our collective vision of a comprehensive, legally binding climate change agreement that is both effective and fair for all. Here in Durban, we can and must take concrete steps towards a more robust climate regime, steps that will carry the momentum to next year's Conference of Parties in Qatar. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, time is not on our side, nor is the rest of the world waiting for us to decide. Across the globe, governments, cities, businesses, and individuals have recognized the threat of climate change. They are acting. They are choosing a low-carbon path because they know it is good for the planet and good for them, good for us. Global investment in clean energy rose from $50 billion in 2004 to $240 billion in 2010, according to one recent report. Several UNFCCC parties have taken significant steps on mitigation, including putting a price on industrial emissions, pledging to reduce carbon intensity, committing to drastically cut greenhouse gas emissions, and working to reduce deforestation. The RED Plus program is creating a financial value for the carbon stored in forests. Governments and the private sector are combining to create a vision for sustainable energy for a win-win-win for poverty reduction, green growth, and cutting greenhouse gas emissions. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let us take inspiration from the progress some are making. Let us find the will to lead despite the many difficulties. Let us prove that we not only know where we are going and how to get there, but that we are prepared to take collective action that will move us down the road. Let us make Durban a profile in political courage. And I thank you for your leadership. Thank you.
I thank you, sir, Secretary General of the United Nations, for your statement. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming His Excellency Mr. Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma, President of the Republic of South Africa. President, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President of the conference. Excellencies, heads of states and government, and leaders of delegations, Royal Highness Prince Albert II, Honorable United Nations Secretary General Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Dr. Ping, the chairperson of the AU Commission, ministers and deputy ministers, the Speaker of our National Parliament, Mr. Max Sisulu, distinguished negotiators, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor and pleasure for me to welcome you to the high-level segment of COP17 CMP7 in Durban, one of the holiday capitals of our country. The past week has seen extensive preparations, formal and informal meetings, planning, negotiations, and maneuvering to ensure the success of the high-level segment. I can safely assure my colleagues, the heads of states and government, as well as the United Nations Secretary General, that your delegations were definitely not on holiday. They worked extremely hard to bring us to this level. As parties, as we meet in Durban, we are agreed on the facts and impacts of climate change, which are already evident all around us. We are agreed that this global challenge requires a global solution. However, different positions still prevail on some critical points. It is important that there is common ground on the elements that will remain critical in reaching any agreement. These are multilateralism, environmental integrity, common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities, equity, and honoring of all international commitments and undertakings made in the climate change process. These principles have formed the basis of climate change negotiations over the years. Only by remaining true to them through the party-driven process will we be able to achieve a credible response to this challenge. I therefore encourage the parties to continue to apply these principles in the discussions and ensure that the final outcome remains faithful to these principles. We need to show the world that parties are ready to address the problems in practical manner and that they are willing to forge and forgo the national interests at times for the interests of humanity, no matter how difficult this may be. As we begin the high-level segment, we need to rebuild trust and to reassure one another of honest, earnest, and commitment to find solutions for the problems caused by climate change. By now, all of us understand that Durban is a decisive moment for the future of the multilateral rules-based system, rules-based regime, which has evolved over many years under the Convention and its Kyoto Protocol. The first commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol is about to come to an end. The question that has been left unanswered from Bali is the second commitment period. This has now become dependent on the decision on the legal nature of the outcome of the negotiations under the Convention. It is also clear that if this question is not resolved, the outcome on other matters will become extremely difficult. In order to find a solution, parties need to be reassured that should some of them commit to a second commitment period under the Kyoto Protocol in a legally binding manner, others would be ready to commit to a legally binding regime in the near future. Underlying this request for reassurance is the insistence that all parties will implement the obligations and commitments previously undertaken, and that all will share the load to address the problem. Parties also need assurances that adequate and sustainable long-term funding will be delivered, and that the implementation of all agreements will continue without an implementation gap occurring. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we need to make a decision here in Durban that includes both the now and future aspects of these reassurances that are needed. On the now and immediate, we need to agree on the adoption of a second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol, as well as the possibility of enhanced mechanisms, and to decide on the eligibility of participation in these enhanced mechanisms. Such an agreement should entail the adoption of an amendment of Annexure B of the Kyoto Protocol with reassurances that parties will implement the amendment domestically by the end of 2012. We must also agree on the formalization and implementation of the mitigation pledges of developed countries and the rules of comparability between the pledges of those parties of the Kyoto Protocol and those parties outside the Kyoto Protocol. Therefore, the rules to assure comparability need to be finalized as soon as possible. An agreement on adaptation, the establishment of the Green Climate Fund, finance, technology transfer, and capacity building must also be part of the agreement in Durban. For the future, parties need to pronounce on the legal nature of the outcome of the future multilateral rules-based system. This should be done in a manner that would be equal in nature to those decided on the second commitment period. In this future multilateral rules-based system, the level of ambition and the fact that all parties will collectively have to do more will have to be addressed. We wish to underscore the point that developed countries have the responsibility to take the lead in addressing the climate change challenges. They must lead the global efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and they must also lead through providing support to developing countries in their mitigation actions and efforts to adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change. This is consistent with the principle of common but differentiated responsibility enshrined in the International Convention on Climate Change. It is common knowledge that developed countries benefited from a high level of emissions for their own development. It is therefore fair that developing countries be provided developmental space in a sustainable way so that they too may develop and eradicate the poverty that continues to afflict their people. We must agree that all parties will have to do more to reach the agreed long-term global goal of limiting average temperature increase to below 2 degrees Celsius. We must agree as well that the international community must honor the international commitments and undertakings made under the climate change process and not to shy away from these decisions. Parties must secure and enhance multilateral rules-based response to climate change that is equally binding on all. Therefore, a process needs to be established for which the 2013-2015 review could provide valuable inputs. This process should also take into account what science prescribes, as well as the outcome of the 5th Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report and other work that would have been done under the ad hoc working group on long-term cooperative action under the Convention and the subsidiary bodies. Parties have to consider the type of process that will be required and a specific time frame to conclude the work. The objective would be for the multilateral rules-based system binding on all parties to be implemented by no later than 2020. Colleagues, heads of states and government, and representatives, esteemed participants, let me briefly name 2 other crucial elements, namely adaptation and finance. Real action on adaptation is an essential element of the outcome. It is also a key priority for many developing countries, particularly small island developing states, least developed countries, and the African continent. The time has come for the world to move away from analysis, study, and research to identifying practical adaptation actions that can be implemented on the ground. There can be no dispute that the research and analysis are important aspects of adaptation actions. However, we now need more practical action. In this regard, the Adaptation Committee must be constituted. Its functions must be decided upon so that it can begin its work. The Adaptation Committee should play an important role in bringing into focus, in a coherent and holistic manner, what needs to be done as far as adaptation is concerned. The committee must bring an end to the current fragmented approach to adaptation in the Convention. The link with the funding, technology transfer, mechanisms, and networks and capacity building for real and tangible adaptation actions must be established. This will give effect to the agreement that equal priority must be given to adaptation and mitigation. And ladies and gentlemen, the Green Climate Fund represents a centerpiece for a broader set of outcomes for Durban. Developing countries demand a prompt start for the fund through its early and initial capitalization. The early capitalization of the fund and the issue of long-term funding present a significant political challenge, given the current economic situation in many developed countries, which, of course, is fully appreciated. Another challenge to overcome is the lack of confidence from developing countries in the delivery and transparency of the pledged Fast Start finance. I'm confident that all parties will make a special effort and show the required leadership to creatively provide these assurances that can lead to consensus on all the outstanding issues. There is a lot of work to be done this week to bring the work of Durban to a fruitful and successful conclusion. We must not hesitate to take the correct decisions. I'm certain that as we interacted here in Durban, very friendly, as I said earlier when I opened first, that the solutions were written in your faces. I want to repeat it, that looking at all of you, you have a solution to this problem, written Durban solutions to climate change. I don't think you want to disappoint the citizens of the globe. I don't think so, particularly given the fact that the leaders have arrived, heads of state and government, the final level to take final decisions, not so. Agreed? The problem is that we all agreed that the earth is in danger. We all agreed that in fact we must do something about it. We also all agreed. But the problem is when we have got to say, what is it? How? I think we must overcome that hurdle. The world is looking at us and is looking at us with hope that we'll be able to take decisions that will help save the globe for ourselves and for coming generations. I certainly wish the parties well during this final push towards a meaningful outcome in Durban. It is only by working together that we will be able to save tomorrow today. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank Your Excellency, President Zuma, for your statement. Now, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to declare open the fourth meeting of the COP and the fourth meeting of the CNP. We will now start hearing national statements during the joint high-level segment of the COP and the CNP. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the conference His Excellency Meles Zenawi, Prime Minister of Ethiopia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellency President Zuma, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General, Excellency Madam President of the Conference, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to, at the outset, to thank our South African hosts for the warm and typical African hospitality that we have enjoyed since we set foot in this beautiful country. I would also wish to congratulate them for the splendid organization of the conference and the excellent facilities made available to all participants to ensure the smooth progress of our deliberations. I believe I speak for Africa as a whole when I say to our brothers and sisters of South Africa, you have done us proud. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the doomsayers are out with full force, and pundits are falling over each other to declare this conference dead on arrival. I think you will agree with me that this prognosis of the premature days of our conference is highly exaggerated. But it would be wrong to underestimate the challenge we face. Indeed, we need to be both ambitious and realistic about what we can achieve at this conference. I believe the key objective here should be to keep moving, as the Secretary General said, to ensure that we make progress on all the issues that are less controversial and avoid backsliding on the difficult ones. So long as we keep moving in the right direction and move as fast as our legs can carry us, we will most certainly reach our final destination and in good time. We in Africa have concrete suggestions as to how we can do that. It's the view of the African Union that we should, as a matter of top priority, concentrate on the operationalization of the agreements we reached in Cancun. We believe we can, in Durban, agree on the governance mechanisms of the fund and operationalize the Adaptation Committee, among many other important issues of operationalization. The issue of funding for climate change adaptation and mitigation is one of utmost importance to us as Africans. We are already severely affected by the climate change, as a result of which the lives of millions of Africans are at stake, as the extraordinary drought in the Horn of Africa shows. We are therefore deeply disappointed that the fast-track funding promised to us in Copenhagen has to a large extent failed to materialize. This puts the credibility of the whole process at risk in the eyes of the peoples of our continent. We are, however, pleased that the Transitional Committee on Finance has come up with a good with good proposals on the governance of the climate fund, Green Climate Fund. We believe the excellent should not be allowed to be the enemy of the good. While we can understand that countries may wish to improve upon and modify the proposals, we are worried that such improvements, which are likely to be minor, will not be worth making an undue delay in establishing the fund. We therefore call on all our partners to approve the proposal as is. Establishing the fund and its governance mechanism would be a major step forward. But such progress will have little meaning unless we proceed to funding the fund. We do not need to reinvent the wheel to fund the fund once it's established. There is a detailed and very practical proposal prepared by the high-level advisory group established by the Secretary General of the United Nations that we took note of in Cancun and can use as the basis for an agreement of actually funding adaptation and mitigation programs once the GCF board is established. The fate of the Kyoto Protocol has for a number of years been an issue of heated debate amongst us, and rightly so. We in Africa recognize that the protocol needs to be updated so that it becomes more comprehensive in coverage and more effective in delivering results with regards to emission reductions. Consistent, of course, with the principles of common but differentiated responsibility. We as Africans are also equally convinced that we cannot come up with a better and more comprehensive deal by abandoning the only deal we have so far that has produced encouraging results. We strongly oppose attempts at backsliding by some Annex I countries. We cannot move forward by moving backward after every progress we make. In this regard, we welcome the readiness of the European Union plus Norway to renew their commitments. We believe this is the environmentally responsible thing to do. We are aware that this is a commitment in principle and has been conditioned on concessions from emerging nations. We hope that some wording could be found to bridge the gap between the two sides, and we are eager to contribute towards it. We at the same time wish to encourage the EU plus Norway not to abandon the Kyoto Protocol, irrespective of whether the gap can be bridged here and now or not. Keeping Kyoto alive until we have something better is too important for the credibility of the whole process to be sacrificed for the tactical advantage at the negotiating table. I wish to conclude by assuring everyone here that the African delegation is here to contribute positively to a successful outcome of the conference and to engage everyone concerned to build consensus and understanding. I thank you for your kind attention.
I would like to thank Your Excellency, Honorable Prime Minister Meles Zenawi, for his statement. And now it gives me pleasure to welcome to the conference His Excellency Mr. Ali Bongo Ondimba, President of Gabon. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, Jacob Zuma, President of the Republic of South Africa, Your Serene Highness, Prince Albert II of Monaco, Excellencies, Head of State of Government and Head Delegation, Your Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Gabon is pleased to participate in this 17th conference of the parties, and I would like to congratulate President Jacob Zuma for hosting this very important gathering. This COP is of crucial importance to the future of our planet and needs to be a moment of profound introspection regarding our collective ambition to act on climate change. It is already almost 20 years since the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, and 15 years since the signature of the Kyoto Protocol. Today, the difficulties we are experiencing in the negotiations underline the need for reform in order to adapt our framework to the scale of the crisis that we face. Climate change has become a global political issue with major implications for peace and security, which poses huge economic and social challenges to us all. We are at a point of no return. A virtuous change in our economic and technological choices and in our modes of consumption is a necessity. We must collectively reassess and adjust our values and establish a new bond of solidarity between states, between peoples, and between generations. Every day of inaction transforms the consequence of climate change into an ever greater human tragedy. We suffer its sinister impact.
for small incremental steps ended long ago, and great strides must be made in a very short amount of time. This effort must begin here in Durban, and three outcomes are absolutely essential. First, we must refocus the negotiations on mitigation and immediately begin a process to ratchet up the ambitions of our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to a level that ensures the viability and survival of all nations. Next, we have a second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol with an enhanced set of rules to strengthen its environmental integrity. Some may think we have the luxury of waiting until we build a new regime. We do not. The Pacific most certainly does not. And finally, we must have a Durban mandate for a new legally binding protocol to complement Kyoto, with binding mitigation commitments for non-Kyoto parties and mitigation actions for developing countries, as well as the conclusion of all other elements of the Bali Action Plan. Alongside these three priorities, we must complete the work begun in Cancun, notably the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Committee, and the Work Program on Loss and Damage. Mr. President, we may be the vanguard of climate change, but we are by no means the only ones suffering. The past year alone has witnessed unprecedented extreme weather on nearly every continent, and according to scientific projections, provides only a glimpse of what the future may hold. Climate change is an international crisis too big for any country to tackle alone. We will succeed together or we will fail together. So also at stake here in Durban is our confidence that together we can resolve the global problems that characterize our era. If the United Nations was created for anything, it was to respond to a challenge such as this. The drafters of its charter, still reeling from the devastation of the Second World War and fearful that civilization could not afford another, recognized that the multilateralism was our best hope for addressing the challenge of an increasingly interconnected world. The stated purpose of the United Charters is to facilitate cooperation in international law, international security, economic development, social progress, human rights, and the achievement of world peace. Our present challenge involves all these things, but our collective goals will be impossible to achieve unless we come to see that our own health and prosperity is closely connected to that of our neighbors. This is a difficult lesson for all of us. The temptation is great to focus on our perceived national interests and turn inward, to see the world as no more than a finite stockpile of resources that must be locked away for the benefit of a few. We reject this conception of the world because history has shown that it leads us to tragedy. Mr. President, the Pacific is taking the lead and putting our words into action. Tuvalu is aiming to provide 100% of its energy from renewable sources by the year 2020, and Tonga expects to reach 50% by next year. Green Energy Micronesia, a plan for Marshall Islands, Micronesia and Palau, is well underway. And my own country of Nauru has set a target of 50% renewable energy by 2015. And as member of the Alliance of Small Island States, we have joined other highly vulnerable countries to consistently offer fair and ambitious proposals at these negotiations, always guided by science. However, delay has left us short on time and vanishingly little to compromise. Mr. President, this year marks the 50th anniversary of the untimely death of Dag Hammarskjöld, the United Nations Second Secretary General and one of the most dynamic leaders. He described the Charter's fundamental principles as, and I quote, expressions of universally shared ideals which cannot fail us, though, alas, we often fail them, end quote. The Pacific nation did not come to Durban to fail. I thank you all.
I would like to thank His Excellency, Mr. Sprint Tabuido, for his statement. It gives me great pleasure now to welcome to the conference His Royal Highness Prince Albert II, Sovereign Prince of Monaco and Head of State. Your Serene Highness, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, President Jacob Zuma, President of South Africa, Your Excellency, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished heads of state and heads of government and heads of delegation, Madam President, ministers, Madam Executive Secretary, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Please allow me first to thank the South African authorities for this wonderful and warm welcome and hospitality. I've been able to appreciate it on various occasions since personal ties now unite the Principality of Monaco to this beautiful country. I will continue in French. À l'heure où de très nombreux États sont confrontés à une crise aux effets dévastateurs, je suis heureux de constater que nous sommes capables de nous réunir et je l'espère d'unir nos efforts pour sauver notre planète. En avons-nous le choix? Je ne le pense pas. L'alternative qui s'offre à nous est hélas bien simple. Changer radicalement de mode de développement, notamment en termes énergétiques, ou attendre que la nature déréglée par notre imprévoyance ne place les générations futures face à des situations catastrophiques et irréversibles. Nous avons tous conscience aujourd'hui de notre responsabilité collective face à la réussite ou à l'échec des suites à donner au protocole de Kyoto. Souvenons-nous de tous les espoirs qui ont porté sa création. Cet instrument juridiquement contraignant nous imposait de réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre qui hypothéquaient l'avenir de notre planète. À ma demande, la Principauté de Monaco a ratifié le protocole de Kyoto en 2006 et s'est engagée à réduire ses émissions de gaz à effet de serre de 8% en 2012 par rapport à 1990. Convaincue de l'urgence de la situation et du bien fondé de ce protocole, la Principauté a donc entrepris les efforts nécessaires, ce qui, en l'absence d'industrie lourde, n'a pas été aisé. Ils ont surtout porté sur une amélioration constante de l'efficacité énergétique, la réduction de l'utilisation de combustibles fossiles et une politique de mobilité favorisant transport en commun et utilisation de véhicules propres, électriques ou hybrides. Aujourd'hui, nous affichons ainsi un bilan de réduction qui, dès fin 2009, s'élevait à 15%. Je réaffirme devant vous l'engagement que j'avais déjà pris il y a 2 ans à Copenhague d'atteindre l'objectif de réduction de 30% en 2020 par rapport à l'année de référence 1990 et de viser la neutralité carbone à l'horizon 2050. Il nous faut maintenant nous convaincre tous ensemble à la fois de la pertinence de poursuivre cet effort engagé il y a 15 ans dans la lutte contre le réchauffement climatique et de la nécessité qu'il soit partagé par le plus grand nombre. Pendant longtemps, les hommes n'ont pas su ni mesuré les blessures qu'ils infligeaient à la nature. Aujourd'hui, nous savons tous, nous disposons de l'extraordinaire masse d'informations que les scientifiques nous fournissent avec rigueur et opiniâtreté depuis des années. Et les experts nous rappellent régulièrement l'urgence de réduire nos émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Ils nous alertent inlassablement de leur impact direct sur le réchauffement de notre planète, avec les conséquences qui sont connues en termes de dérèglement climatique, de montée des eaux et des océans ou de l'amplification des phénomènes météorologiques. L'an dernier, les émissions des principaux gaz à effet de serre ont franchi des niveaux records jamais encore atteints jusqu'à aujourd'hui, comme le soulignait récemment l'Organisation météorologique mondiale. Ce constat connu de tous ne doit-il pas nous amener à nous interroger sur notre responsabilité collective face aux générations futures? Ne doit-il pas définitivement guider nos travaux? Comment pouvons-nous rester figés dans nos clivages lorsqu'en ce moment même, en certains points du monde, l'urgence est telle qu'elle fragilise désormais le quotidien des populations directement touchées par les aléas climatiques? Ne devons-nous pas avoir le courage politique de dépasser nos différences et de travailler avec un état d'esprit novateur à la recherche de compromis? Excellences, Madame le Président, aujourd'hui, la conscience de la situation est claire et l'action encore possible. Nous n'avons aucune excuse à l'inaction. Je suis plus convaincu que jamais de la nécessité de promouvoir un accord qui engage tous les pays, et ce, en dépit des difficultés que rencontre le monde aujourd'hui, de la crise économique qui peut conduire les gouvernements à faire des choix à court terme, là où une vision à long terme s'impose. Nous devons éviter que la catastrophe climatique qui se profile et que nous avons provoquée ne s'aggrave. Il s'agit de concrétiser l'accord formulé à Cancun. Notamment, le Fonds vert pour le climat doit être rendu opérationnel ici et maintenant en approuvant le projet d'instrument débattu dans cette Assemblée. Nous devons maintenant construire la confiance qui passe par une juste prise en compte des spécificités de chaque pays et qui permettent d'accroître progressivement notre niveau d'ambition. Un niveau d'ambition suffisant pour maintenir l'augmentation de la température planétaire moyenne en deçà des 2 degrés Celsius, en dépit des doutes légitimes quant au respect de cet objectif. Madame la Présidente, je tiens aujourd'hui à relayer la voix du groupe d'intégrité environnementale auquel mon pays prend part, aux côtés du Liechtenstein, du Mexique, de la République de Corée et de la Suisse. Ce groupe, fort de l'union de pays annexe 1 et non annexe 1, provenant de divers continents, a toujours cherché à se montrer constructif et pragmatique pour tenter d'esquisser les pistes de compromis dans les moments difficiles des négociations. À cette fin, il souhaite que nous puissions nous entendre sur les éléments fondamentaux d'un régime international pour l'après-2012, le lancement d'un processus permettant de renforcer le régime à moyen terme, enfin, les bases même d'une vision partagée, y compris un objectif mondial à long terme de réduction des émissions et une date limite pour le pic des émissions mondiales. Parvenir à un accord sur ces questions clés, n'est pas impossible si toutes les parties font preuve de courage et sont animées d'une réelle détermination. Madame le Président, comme l'a dit le professeur Wangari Maathai, une des figures les plus éminentes de cette terre africaine qui nous accueille et qui nous a récemment quittés, je cite, « We cannot tire or give up. We owe it to the present and future generations of all species to rise up and walk. Sous votre conduite, je reste confiant quant à la capacité de cette Assemblée d'ouvrir une voie nouvelle et déterminante vers une réduction réelle et pérenne des émissions de gaz à effet de serre, seul enjeu qui nous réunit aujourd'hui. Merci.
I would like to thank His Royal Highness Prince Albert II for his statement. It gives me great pleasure now to welcome to this conference His Excellency Souleymane Ndéné Ndiaye, Honorable Prime Minister of Senegal. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Son Altesse Albert II, Prince de Monaco, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Monsieur le Secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Monsieur le Président de la Commission de l'Union africaine, Madame la Présidente de la 17e session, la 17e conférence des parties à la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur les changements climatiques, Madame le Secrétaire exécutif de la Convention, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants des organisations internationales et intergouvernementales, Mesdames et Messieurs les invités, honorables délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs. Permettez-moi avant tout de transmettre à Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la République d'Afrique du Sud, M. Jacob Zuma, les salutations fraternelles de Son Excellence, Maître Abdoulaye Wade, Président de la République du Sénégal, qui, en raison de son calendrier national extrêmement chargé, n'a pu prendre part à ces importantes assises de Durban. Je voudrais aussi remercier le gouvernement et le peuple sud-africain pour l'accueil aimable qui a été réservé à ma délégation ainsi qu'à moi-même depuis notre arrivée dans ce très beau pays, ainsi que pour la bonne organisation de cette conférence des parties. Une semaine avant l'ouverture de la conférence, s'est éteint à Bonn un illustre fils de l'Afrique. Je vous nommais M. Mama Konaté, président de l'organe subsidiaire du Conseil scientifique et technologique. Je m'incline devant sa mémoire et présente au peuple frère malien et à toute l'Afrique les condoléances du peuple sénégalais. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, c'est pour moi un insigne honneur de représenter à cette conférence le président Abdoulaye Wade, dont l'engagement sans faille pour la cause de la préservation de notre environnement se traduit par de nombreuses initiatives visant à protéger notre planète des effets pervers des changements climatiques. En lui confiant la coordination du volet environnement du nouveau partenariat pour le développement de l'Afrique NEPAD, ses pairs africains ont voulu miser sur son leadership dans la mobilisation pour combattre la dégradation permanente de notre écosystème, annonciatrice de grands et profonds bouleversements pour les sociétés humaines. Il ne fait aucun doute que ce rendez-vous de Durban constitue une étape cruciale au péril qui menace notre planète. Vous conviendrez donc avec moi que le temps ne joue pas en notre faveur. Au regard de l'ampleur de plus en plus inquiétante des changements climatiques. Face à cette situation, nous n'avons malheureusement pas beaucoup d'alternatives. Je devrais même dire que la seule option qui nous est aujourd'hui offerte est d'accélérer le rythme de progression des négociations pour à la fois montrer notre volonté ferme de préserver la planète des conséquences désastreuses des changements climatiques et léguer aux générations futures une planète viable. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, il n'est point besoin d'épiloguer longtemps sur ce qui est attendu de cette 17e conférence des parties. L'attente majeure ici à Durban, c'est ce que nous aurions dû réaliser il y a de cela 2 ans à Copenhague, c'est-à-dire nous accorder sur la configuration du futur régime, sur le climat et particulièrement sur une seconde période d'engagement au titre du protocole de Kyoto avec des objectifs de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre juridiquement contraignants et conformes aux recommandations de la science, notamment celles contenues dans le 4e rapport d'évaluation du groupe intergouvernemental d'experts et l'évolution du climat, GIEC. La réalisation de cette attente n'est pas hors de notre portée. Avec un peu plus de volonté, nous pouvons parfaitement y arriver. Nous gardons toujours à l'esprit la grande déception vécue à Copenhague. L'année dernière, à pareil moment, nous avions réussi à relancer le processus multilatéral avec l'adoption des accords de Cancun qui ont donné un souffle nouveau au processus de négociation sur le climat. Ces accords, même s'ils ne répondent pas à toutes les attentes, constituent un pas important vers le futur régime climatique que nous appelons de tous nos vœux. Il faut reconnaître à cet égard que la présidence mexicaine a été pour beaucoup dans le progrès accompli à Cancun. Nous n'en attendions pas moins en terre africaine de la présidence sud-africaine. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, depuis que les négociations sur le futur régime multilatéral du climat ont été lancées à Bali en 2007, la communauté internationale a consenti beaucoup d'efforts en termes de mobilisation, de soutien financier et de travail intellectuel pour arriver à des résultats acceptables pour tous. Ces efforts ne doivent pas être vains. Nous devons certes faire preuve de responsabilité quand il s'agit de défendre les droits inaliénables de nos populations, mais nous devons aussi faire preuve de bon sens et de flexibilité quand les circonstances l'exigent, surtout en ce moment où l'inquiétude gagne de plus en plus les esprits en raison de l'incertitude qui plane sur l'avenir du protocole de Kyoto. Les deux organes mis en place pour négocier le futur régime climatique, je veux citer le groupe de travail ad hoc sur la coopération à long terme et le groupe de travail ad hoc sur le protocole de Kyoto, ont travaillé d'arrache-pied pour accomplir leur mandat conformément à la feuille de route de Bali. Nous sommes cependant au regret de constater que leur mission tend à s'éterniser, faute d'accord sur les différents points de leur agenda, et ce, aux grandes dames des pays les plus vulnérables qui continuent de payer un lourd tribut face aux effets pervers des changements climatiques. L'heure est venue de démontrer notre capacité à transcender nos intérêts égoïstes et à nous unir autour de l'essentiel lorsque les événements l'exigent. C'est pourquoi je voudrais réitérer ici l'engagement solennel du Sénégal à ne ménager aucun effort pour soutenir toutes les initiatives allant dans le sens d'un régime climatique plus efficace, plus ambitieux et plus équitable, y compris une deuxième période d'engagement au titre du protocole de Kyoto. J'insiste particulièrement sur ce point, car le protocole de Kyoto représente aujourd'hui un instrument incontournable dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques. Et comme vous le savez, au-delà des engagements juridiquement contraignants, en matière de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre, la préservation du fonds d'adaptation constitue un enjeu important pour nos pays. En effet, le démarrage effectif des activités de ce fonds a suscité beaucoup d'espoir dans les pays en développement. Cet espoir ne doit pas être déçu. En tant que premier pays au monde à avoir bénéficié des financements du fonds d'adaptation, le Sénégal a le devoir moral de lutter de toutes ses forces pour la survie du protocole de Kyoto. Notre souhait le plus ardent est de voir tous les pays en développement durement touchés par les changements climatiques bénéficier du soutien du fonds d'adaptation pour soulager les souffrances de leurs populations qui chaque jour doivent affronter avec les moyens dérisoires les catastrophes occasionnées par les changements climatiques. La seule garantie juridiquement contraignante dont nous disposons à ce jour est le protocole de Kyoto, raison pour laquelle le Sénégal attache du prix à sa poursuite après 2012. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, nous ne le répéterons jamais assez. La réalisation du développement durable et l'élimination de la pauvreté demeurent les priorités de l'Afrique. Ces priorités sont difficilement réalisables dans un contexte où les changements climatiques s'érigent en obstacle à tout effort de développement. tous les efforts déployés dans notre continent ou par notre continent pour atteindre ces objectifs de développement, y compris les objectifs du millénaire pour le développement, peuvent être réduits à néant. À cet égard, je voudrais souligner l'impérieuse nécessité de convenir ici et maintenant sur les mesures que devront prendre les pays développés, en particulier pour réduire leurs émissions de gaz à effet de serre, de manière à limiter l'augmentation de la température moyenne mondiale bien en deçà de 2 degrés Celsius. Les pays en développement pourront naturellement, et comme ils le font déjà, contribuer de façon substantielle à cet objectif sur la base du principe non négociable de la responsabilité commune mais différenciée. Notre pays s'est engagé, dans le cadre de sa 3e communication nationale, à réfléchir sur les mesures d'atténuation appropriées au niveau national pour réduire ses émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Cependant, l'une des conditions premières pour mettre en œuvre ces mesures réside sans aucun doute dans la disponibilité de ressources financières nouvelles et additionnelles, de technologies appropriées, ainsi que dans le renforcement des capacités techniques.
Excellences, Monsieur le Président Zuma, Président de la République d'Afrique du Sud, Son Altesse Albert II de la Principauté de Monaco, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État